Hey, so my last video was titled The Return, and that was 7 months ago. What happened? Well, hello everyone. If you don't know me, I am jeninsight. I talk about books and being a trans woman in America on the internet. If that sounds like something you are interested in, I encourage you to subscribe, hit the bell, hang out, let's be friends. So, as the title suggests, I recently had a flare-up of mental health issues that were so bad that I would categorize them as a mental breakdown. And I had to do something about it. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through my mental health journey so far. I'm going to be talking about, hey, what was going on? How did I seek help and what did that process look like? What about that process did I find useful or not useful? Some best practices for mental health and the type of program I went through, and the final verdict of, hey, did it work? Was it worth it? So, let's get underway. Sort of just up front as well, I want to give the trigger warnings because obviously we are going to be talking about mental health here, and that can be tough for a lot of people. So if this isn't your type of thing, I'll see you in the next video. It's going to be a fun one. So first and foremost, what was going on? What was the problem? Now, I, like many people, have had my share of mental health struggles over the years, but in particular, this period of time got very, very bad, to the point where I was having panic attacks pretty much every day, and they were so severe that I was completely debilitated. I couldn't do anything. I was just in bed, curled up, crying, just felt like I was at the end of all things, like the world was coming down around me, and it got to the point where it was affecting my ability to go to work and my interpersonal relationships, which is when I realized that it really was something I had to address. Because once it starts getting in the way of the money and the social everything, then your problem has become a severe problem, in my opinion. Just a disclaimer here, I'm not a mental health professional, I'm just telling you about my experience and the way I worked through everything, okay? So, like I was saying, I was having severe panic attacks, I was having severe intrusive thoughts around some very unpleasant things, and so I started looking around for ways that I could address my mental health quickly and robustly, let's say. And a lot of my friends have had some sort of experience with and or success with partial hospitalization programs. Now, for those of you who don't know what those are, that is a situation where it's not quite inpatient care, you're not being committed, it's not a grippy sock vacation as they're very fond of calling it on TikTok. But instead, think of it as kind of like your job becomes going to group therapy and taking care of yourself. We'll get into what that looks like in a little bit, but that's where I landed. I felt that was something that I could derive a lot of value from and that could potentially help me get my shit together. So what did that process look like? First and foremost, it was about finding a program near me that I found useful that also, and this is crucial, we'll come back to this later, took my insurance. Luckily for me, I found one through a friend of mine in a local hospital. It was just a 20-minute drive down the road, so convenience. Hey, convenient win. We love that. And the first step of that was an intake process. For those of you that are familiar with any sort of mental health, anything, whether it be a psychiatrist, therapist, a program like this, you're used to taking intake surveys. And when it got to the part where I was explaining to the social worker the reasons I was seeking help, and I had to take not one, not two, but 3 full breaths to list all of my mental health symptoms, that's when it really clicked for me that I was like, yeah, this is a problem. So after I finished the intake, I did the next logical step. I dyed my hair and got bangs, because if I was going to be mentally ill, I should at least look the part. And as you can tell, the bangs are no more. I liked them. They just didn't like me. They were kind of difficult to keep up, and they kept poking me in the eyes. So we're back to the classic jeninsight look. So after I had taken the intake survey, got everything in order, I had a date when I was going to go into the program. So at that point, I had to set up with work and this third-party organization company that my company works with called Sedgwick to arrange for a short-term disability leave. Yes, mental health and a severe mental health problem does count as a disability. It's okay to claim that title for yourself and take up that space. It is okay, is what I keep telling myself. So, my PHP experience was set to take about 15 business days, so I was going to be out of work for 3 weeks. You might be wondering, oh my god, Jen, how did you afford that? Is TikTok and YouTube really that lucrative? No. But we'll get to that when we get to the insurance part of this. But essentially, I arranged for a last day, Sedgwick took care of the leave, and I just had to get ready for my first day at my PHP. So I'm going to break down my experience into two distinct sort of like phases. The first day, which is very different from the rest of all of it, and then the day-to-day structure of the PHP program. So the first day that I'm about to describe, in all of its horror, is different than what I came out of this with. So just stay with me. Don't despair just yet. My first day involved showing up a little earlier than I was going to have to. Typically, the program ran from about 8:30 to about 2:30 every day, but this time I was in at 8 o'clock. This was to go through some extra intake steps like meeting with a nurse, getting my vitals taken, meeting with a psychiatrist to be like, hey, what meds are you on? And me going, none. We should fix that. And then basically just talking with a few of the social workers around what I was experiencing and what I was hoping to get out of the program, which was really my life back. Low stakes here. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I got off to a rough start with this PHP program because, as we'll talk about a little bit later in the things that I find useful or not useful, I landed on a day that wasn't particularly useful to me. After I did all of my intake stuff, I was put into the group therapy session with all these people I didn't know, which just felt great, let me tell you. And we watched a TED Talk of Brené Brown. A Brené Brown TED Talk. Now, no hate to anyone out there who does enjoy Brené Brown, but she is not very much my cup of tea or whiskey or water, or really not even a cup to me. So I was upset. I was like, oh my goodness, have I made the wrong choice? Is this not going to help me? Am I just going to keep feeling this way forever? Which, if any of you have a lot of mental health issues, or any mental health issues really, that's going to feel really familiar. Just ride it out. Stay with me here. Stay with me here. It got better. So now that we've gotten the first day out of the way, let me talk about the structure for a typical day in the PHP. The first thing you do when you come in every day, other than get coffee, which, oh my god, did I drink so much coffee, was a survey about your mental health at that moment, like your current mental state at that moment, and sort of like, what happened last night, what did you do to take care of yourself, all that sort of fun stuff that would then lead into a group discussion of everyone's surveys. This took usually about an hour, and right after that there would be a break of some kind. After the break, there would be 2 blocks that we sort of considered like different class blocks, you know, like not like C's the means of production class, like school class. Yeah, they know that, Jennifer, got this. And each of those classes would be taught by a different member of the PHP staff. Some of them were interns, some of them were social workers, some of them were like master social workers, which I assume means you defeated some sort of like monster in like single combat to gain the title of master social worker. I have no reason to think otherwise, so we're gonna go with that. Then, after those 2 classes, there would be lunch, and then another class, and then there would be a wrap-up, which is very similar to the like first thing in the morning survey, but this was, how are you feeling now after the day? Which, spoiler alert, sometimes you'll be feeling worse, and that's okay. And also the things that you plan to do to take care of yourself that night or that weekend, depending on what day of the week it was. And this touches on one of the things that I found most helpful of the PHP program, and that was the structure. You could count on every day to follow basically the same flow. The content would be different every day, but the structure was the same. And that really helped my mental health, and I know it helps a lot of other people's mental health. I'm autistic, so already that helps me quite a bit. Like structure, I know what to expect, plans. And the content is what I want to focus in on next, because the content is very dependent on who is running each particular class. So the PHP was staffed with a couple different kinds of people. There were interns who were working towards some sort of degree in either mental health or social work, something like that. There were social workers who this was like their bread and butter. This is how they like wanted to go out into the world and help people, which I assume is the impetus for all social workers. No one's ever in it for the money, it feels like. There was a medical nurse, and also there was a psychiatrist who was there twice a week. The interesting thing about getting these different striations of people is you get different personalities, and you also get different content, like different categories of content, if you will. Like a good example is the nurse would often talk about things like gut health or ways to calm yourself down if you are having a panic attack, which I was like furiously taking notes on that one. While the intern stuff was a little more like artsy craftsy, let's get in touch with our feelings, talk about how we feel type stuff. You know, like a real Drake type beat. So now that I've got like the sort of structure out of the way, I want to talk about what I found useful and what I didn't find so useful, because both of these are really important if you're trying to decide whether or not a PHP is right for you. The stuff that I found useful was coping skills. The main social worker guy who was running things, he was very versed in what's called dialectical behavior therapy, which is DBT. He also touched a little bit on cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Do not Google that with safe search off. I promise you, you don't want what you're gonna find. Or maybe you will. I'm not here to kink shame. A lot of that was based around finding things that worked for you to set up your life so that you were less likely to have a mental health episode, which I found very helpful because I'm a creature of habit, as we have discussed. So having those tools, those coping skills to sort of get myself back on track and also lay the track so that I was less likely to have a problem, that was huge for me. Something that I also found super helpful, at least the way that I intake information, is I had a lot of handouts at the end of this that I can still look over. I have a corkboard in my room that has all the stuff that I deemed useful just pinned on it. If only the corkboard would stay on the wall. It keeps falling down and scaring the shit out of me, but that's neither here nor there. And it's good to be able to revisit that stuff when I feel like I'm maybe falling off my mental health regime a little bit. Mental health is a lot like physical health. You don't lift weights once and then you're fit forever. You have to keep at it. It's a practice. It's an exercise. The most important muscle between the ears. That's a stupid joke, Jennifer, cut that out. Having those really made it feel like I could keep revisiting the PHP without actually having to go back into the PHP. Another thing that I found super helpful was meeting with a psychiatrist, because I had never been to a psychiatrist before. Like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't on any mental health medication, and I should have been. I should have been for a long time. In fact, this experience is what allowed me to walk away with a pretty good idea of what's going on up here. Yeah, that's huge. Being able to know sort of what's going on up here made everything feel a lot more manageable, which helped me feel like there was hope. So that was cool. Just wish they didn't bill me separately to see her. Like, you're part of the PHP, just roll it all together in one bill. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And also, and this may not be the case for a lot of you, but I work 40 hours a week, so having the PHP be 8:30 to 2:30 gave me a lot of extra free time to either practice the things they had told me about or just do whatever I wanted. And that was also huge for my mental health. I didn't realize how much I had fallen away from doing things that I wanted to or things that I loved until I was given the time to do it again. So now I'm trying to be much more intentional around building time for myself and advocating for my needs, which is a perfect segue to best practices. I feel one of the biggest best practices out there is to understand that not everything in the PHP is going to be for you, and that's okay. I found about 30% of the classes that I was in were completely useless to me. Other people in the group found them very helpful. That was their favorite thing when they went around the circle and talked about our favorite thing that we learned that day, while I was like, how could you possibly get any value out of that. It's almost like we're different people. Which leads me to another thing that I didn't get a lot of value out of, which was the group discussions. I may not seem like it, but I'm actually a very quiet person. I'm actually a very keep to myself kind of person. I'll engage people in conversation, but I have no desire to share what I'm thinking with a group, especially if what I'm thinking about is dark mental health stuff, But other people, they did not share that compunction, and boy did they share a lot of stuff that they probably shouldn't have. Overshare. Trauma dump. Girl boss. Another thing too, and this was very specific to my PHP, was one of the facilitators, one of the social workers, this dude just talked. Talked and talked and talked and talked, right? He just talked forever. He would make a good point, then he would have an example to back it up, and then he would keep fleshing out that example like he was writing a fan fiction about these characters that he created for his example. We were getting looks into their psyche, their backstory, their sex lives, their political philosophies, all the stuff that, bestie, we did not need. So as time went on, I learned that I could either be frustrated that not everything was for me, or I could adjust my expectations, which is kind of a big deal in cognitive behavior therapy. So, gold star, Jen. I realized, hey, not everything's going to be for me, so I need to find something else to do during those particular classes. And this was pretty common. A lot of people would color, some people would play with fidget toys, some people would just be on their phone. That was when they were I'm not getting anything out of this, and that's okay. I, of course, just started reading. I read through all of Romeo and Juliet. I read through most of this really fascinating but dense book on Shakespeare's First Folio and the history of it. And also, I got halfway-ish through this psychology book called The Courage to be Disliked. I'm still working on it because it's kind of dense and I want to mull over everything that's happening in it, but it dovetailed nicely with what I was going through. I also learned to advocate for my needs in that scenario. The talkative social worker was fond of doing a class and then handing out the worksheet that he was going from afterwards. I was very particular about saying, hey, can I get this ahead of time so that I can follow along? This will be more helpful for me when I'm trying to take in this information and stay focused. I had to do it a few times, so if you get shut down and you know it's for the best and it won't affect anyone else, stay on them about it. You're paying to be there. This is your mental health. Stick up for yourself. And then the last thing that I would tell you to do is make friends. I made a couple friends while I was there, and one of them, she and I would just be texting back and forth during the more boring classes, the classes we weren't particularly engaged in, and we were just roasting people. It was great. It was a good time. Get yourself a friend like her. So the final verdict of, is it worth it? Yes, with a caveat. I felt like I got my life back, which is what I wanted going into the PHP. I very rarely have panic attacks now, and when I do, I have the coping skills to pull myself out of them before they get too acute. And I've set up my life in such a way, or I've tried to set up my life in such a way that doesn't happen quite as much. My intrusive thoughts have pretty much completely stopped, which is nice because I can think again without my brain screaming at me to do the bad thing. All of that, absolute win. Love it to death. So where's the caveat, you might be asking? And that's in the price. I was fortunate enough to be able to take 3 full weeks off from work and have that covered under the short-term disability leave. I was also lucky enough that my insurance was taken by this PHP, because just raw cost, PHP would have been about $60,000, and that is absolutely too much money for what I got out of that. That's 2 cars worth of value, and no. After insurance, it came down to about $1,600, which, yes, that is worth it. Absolutely, that's worth it. I recognize that I am profoundly lucky and privileged enough to have been able to do this. I was able to take this time off, have it protected, still have income coming in. Also, I could have insurance cut down this cost quite a bit for me. And I recognize not everyone has both of those things, or maybe even either of those things. And what I say to that is, we need nationalized healthcare, but that's neither here nor there, all right? Everyone should be able to take care of themselves. No one should feel like they have to put themselves and their mental health at risk just so they don't end up out on the street. I know I'm spitting some real controversial game here. That was the most awkward sentence I've ever said. So there you have it, my friends. That is my experience with my partial hospitalization program. Hopefully you found whether or not it could help you or it pointed you in the right direction if you are having some of these problems. Something else I would say is that if you are having any sort of suicidal ideation, this is the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. They have helped me more than once. Stick around. I promise you it gets better. I promise you, okay? Right here. I promise you. So with that, I will see you next time. If you made it all the way through this video and you haven't subscribed and hit the bell or whatever the kids are doing these days, consider doing that. If you want to be a real super fan, here are the rest of my socials right here. Jen_insight on Twitch and Instagram, and jeninsight on TikTok. And this here platform that you see, that you're seeing me on, here we are. I will see you next time, my friends, for something a little more fun. This was great. I'm back for real this time, and I'll see you next time. Love you.